Released in 1991, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead is a teen comedy about a group of siblings let loose without any adult supervision, where they must fend for themselves. 17-year-old Sue Ellen Crandall, played by Christina Applegate, believes that she will be parent-free after her mum takes off on a trip to Australia with her boyfriend, leaving the 5 siblings behind, because clearly this mum is a terrible person. However, the Crandall kids get a rude awakening when a babysitter unexpectedly turns up, who may look like a sweet old lady, is actually an abusive tyrant, and after the babysitter unexpectedly dies, the kids get rid of the body out of fear that they would be blamed for her death, where it's up to Sue to seek out a job and provide and keep the household going. But will this 17-year-old have what it takes to face the big bad real world in this memorable comedy classic? So today we are looking into Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, which starred Christina Applegate, aka many young people's first crush in the late 80s and early 90s, thanks to Married with Children. So let's get ready to dispose of the babysitter's dead corpse and check out 10 things that you didn't know about this movie.
I'm right on top of that, Rose.
Number 10. Risky inspiration. Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead was written by Melrose Place and Doogie Howser MD scriptwriter Neil Landau and novelist Tara Izon. They conceived the idea in the early 80s after watching the teen comedy Risky Business, which starred Tom Cruise. They liked the concept of a teenager being left at home on their own, and then through exceptional circumstances have to enter the big bad adult world, where the character goes on a journey of self-discovery and self-awakening, and manages to survive on their wits and newfound maturity. And yes, this happens in both Risky Business and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. However, the biggest difference between the two is Tom Cruise becomes a pimp, whereas Christina Applegate becomes a receptionist. Another noticeable difference is Risky Business is very 80s, whereas Don't Tell Mom is very 90s. That and Risky Business at time kind of has an art house feel. And when you realise these similarities, it's glaringly obvious. It's actually pretty cool that Don't Tell Mom can take the concept, but at the same time not rip off Risky Business and do its own thing. Number 9. Original title. Neil Landau and Tara Izon's original script for Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead was actually simply called Real World, as a reference to the fact that the Crandall kids are left to their own devices without any parental or adult supervision. Real World kind of sounds mundane and generic, whereas Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead is, well, there's no other title like it, that's for sure, and it immediately sets up the movie's comedic pace. The script was sold to 20th Century Fox, where they then subsequently shelved the project as they felt the script was a little too serious and wanted something more light-hearted. Because Lord knows, nothing screams deep and dramatic like having a frozen pizza toss. Basically, it seems that 20th Century Fox lost confidence in the script. Apparently, in the original script, there was also ambiguity over the babysitter's death, with it being implied that it may have been at the hands of one of the Crandall kids. But yeah, making one of the kids a possible killer was probably a little too dark. Number 8. Original actress to play Swell. When Don't Tell Mom was at the hands of 20th Century Fox, their number one choice to play the movie's main lead, Sue Ellen, was Winona Ryder. Which makes sense, as in the late 80s and early 90s, Ryder was a highly sought-after actress, having starred in Heathers and Beetlejuice, and she also starred in 20th Century Fox's very own production of Edward Scissorhands, so she would have been very bankable. But after they couldn't get Ryder, Justine Bateman was also considered. But after 20th Century Fox abandoned the project, the script was sold to a production company called Outlaw Productions, which would in turn see the movie distributed by Warner Brothers. Outlaw Productions turned their attention to casting Christina Applegate as the lead, thanks to her role in the hit sitcom Married with Children, and supposedly her Married with Children co-star Ed O'Neill encouraged her to take on the role, as he was friends with a producer who worked on the movie. Jennifer Love Hewitt was also cast as the youngest daughter, Melissa Crandall, but she had to leave the project as she had a contract with the Disney Channel, of which they wouldn't release her to star in Don't Tell Mom. Speaking of Winona Ryder and Heathers, Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead was composed by David Newman, who previously scored the as-mentioned Heathers, and I always found many of the music cues in Don't Tell Mum to sound very similar to Heathers, like, as in a lot. But what about the other cast members of Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead? Number 7. Starring actors that you've seen in that other movie. With the exception of a few actors, most of the cast of Don't Tell Mum aren't exactly big names, but no doubt faces that you've seen in small roles in other movies. You know, those kind of actors that make you say, oh yeah, there's that person who I saw in that other movie one time. The 3 biggest stars to star in the movie are Christina Applegate, along with Joanna Cassidy, who played the head of the fashion company Rose. Cassidy also starred in Blade Runner and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as well as David Duchovny, who played the snivelling Bruce character. This was one of his first movie roles, and he would go on to have breakout success as Fox Mulder in the X-Files TV series. The other actors who you've probably seen around but scratching your head as to where you've actually seen them include Keith Coogan, who previously starred in The Adventures of Babysitting, John Childs, who plays Swell's love interest Brian. Childs previously starred in Dead Poets Society. John Getz played Gus. Getz previously starred as Stamfus in the Fly movies, and just as with those movies, he's playing a sleazy creep in Don't Tell Mum. Robert Gorman played Walter. Gorman also appeared in the fun, cheesy horror movie The Leprechaun, and Sometimes They Come Back. Halloween 4 and 5 actress Danielle Harris played Melissa. Christopher Petit played Zach, who was also the kid who sold Keanu Reeves a surfboard in Point Break. And Jane Brooke played the movie's antagonist Carolyn. Brooke also played Jeremy's schoolteacher in Superman 4 The Quest for Peace. Yeah, quite a random ensemble, really. Now, if I've missed an actor, please don't hold it against me. Sometimes when I talk about the cast in certain movies, people say, well, why didn't you mention this actor? Sometimes people even act like it's a personal attack. Like they're saying, why did you leave this person out? What have you got against them? So if that ever does happen, please don't take it personal, we're all friends here. Number 6, From Bill and Ted to A Babysitter Who's Dead. Supposedly, John Landis and John Hughes were approached to direct Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead, but turned the job down. Eventually, it was director Stephen Herrick who was hired to direct Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead. Herrick at the time was best known for directing Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, so he had experience in handling wacky teen comedies. However, according to Wikipedia, Don't Tell Mum's co-writer Neil Landau wasn't all that keen on Herrick directing the movie. But I think that Herrick does a competent job with Don't Tell Mum. Okay, he doesn't use glorious art house angles or anything like that, but then again, Don't Tell Mum is just a fun comedy, so he gets the job done. Herrick also directed the horror comedy Critters, and after Don't Tell Mum would direct other popular movies like The Mighty Ducks and Mr. Holland's Opus. Now this is purely speculation on my part, but I wonder if he didn't direct Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey because he was working on Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead instead. After all, both movies would have been in production at the same time as they both came out in 1991. Number 5, Movie Poster. The movie poster for Don't Tell Mum always made me laugh, as we see the babysitter's dead legs sticking out of the Crandall's front yard, instantly setting up that this is a black comedy full of mortality shenanigans. However, I always felt that the kids standing on the porch looked a little bit like cardboard cutouts, but regardless, it's a fun poster. Whereas the Italian poster is quite strange, which actually uses an illustrated approach, which sees the dead legs, as with the US version, along with the Crandall kids looking really happy that their babysitter is dead. Seriously, look at how delighted they are. We also see that the Crandalls apparently live in the Addams Family house, and Christina Applegate, you know, the main star of the movie, is nowhere in sight. Instead we get this guy. I don't know who he is. Is he meant to be the Kenny character? He looks more like Rick Moranis from the Flintstones movie. It's definitely an interesting take on the poster. Some modern home media releases have reworked the poster into this cover, which sees the Crandall kids scattered at the bottom right corner, with this huge mound of dirt just dumped in the bottom left-hand corner, with most of the cover consisting of blue cloudy sky. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this one, it's kind of boring. Give me the original poster any day. Number 4, PG13 Fbombs. You know how these days people say the PG-13 rating has lost its nerve and it's nowhere near edgy or as daring as it used to be? Well, nowhere is this more evident than in Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead, which despite using the F word a staggering 7 times, was still somehow able to get a PG-13 rating. The PG-13 rating was introduced in 1984 thanks to Steven Spielberg wanting more daring movies while still being able to reach a wider market. However, there were certain rules to obtaining a PG-13 rating, such as if you use the F word, you can only use it once, as long as it's not of a sexual nature. Which is why you get movies like Beetlejuice, where you will get that one scene of the F-bomb dropped in there, usually for comedic effect. However, Don't Tell Mum drops the F word multiple times and still manages to get a PG-13 rating. Oh, how the times have changed. This would never happen now. In reality, Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead probably should have been a hard R, and yet it somehow slipped through the cracks. Number 3, MTV had issues with the movie's title. So as I mentioned, the original title for Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead was the more mundane Real World. So what led to the movie going from that to Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead? Well, it was none other than MTV. The music channel was working on a reality TV show which was also called The Real World, so no doubt there may have been confusion. After all, some viewers probably would have thought that the two were connected, and that Don't Tell Mum was like the movie version of the show, or vice versa. To be fair though, both the TV show and the movie would have been in production at the same time, hence Don't Tell Mum's production only found out about the show once filming had wrapped up. In fact, the Real World MTV show wasn't actually aired until 1992, 1 year after the release of the movie. But regardless, the title was changed, and the movie's co-writer Neil Landau originally didn't like the title of Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead, feeling that it sounded too comical and jokey. However, Johnny Carson saved the day, as after the talk show host made a light-hearted joke about the title, Landau actually grew to appreciate it more. And you know that your movie title must be pretty impactful when Johnny Carson is making jokes about it. In fact, going by memory, it was the movie's title that stood out the most and got everyone talking about it, simply because it did sound so outrageous. Number 2, unable to escape the clutches of Home Alone. Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead was released in June 1991 and would go on to make over $21 million on a $10 million budget, with its box office intake disappointing the movie's production company, who thought the movie would bring in higher numbers. What's worse is that critics did not look upon Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead with a positive light, with it being labelled as a new herd of kids on the loose movie, a trend made popular by Home Alone. In fact, several reviews would often make callbacks to Home Alone, stating that it continues what Home Alone started, only it's not as good, even though the movies aren't even really similar. As mentioned, Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead is more risky business than Home Alone, but for some reason the movie couldn't escape Home Alone's shadow. In fact, it was even labelled as Home Alone meets Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which actually sounds like an awesome concept when you think about it. The movie's humour was criticised, along with it being labelled as too consumeristic. And its title inevitably also came under fire, which makes you wonder if Neil Landau's concerns of the title were justified. But all this is strange to me, as I remember when Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead was released in Australia, it was actually really popular here. Everyone liked it and everyone was talking about it, and with me and my friends it was something of a must-see movie. Like what The Mask and Dumb and Dumber would be. Number 1, growing popularity. Despite its poor box office takings and unfavourable reviews, Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead would finally find success thanks to VHS and cable TV broadcasts. It's like the movie slipped by with its theatrical release, but finally got noticed when it reached home media and TV. The film has gone on to become a cult classic, and is still a fan pleaser to this day. I think it's another case of a movie coming out, of which the older audiences and critics didn't like it or understand it, but the younger audience who the movie was talking to was totally on board, and have grown up with a fond love of it, which frequently happens with movies aimed at a teenage/young adult audience. Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead is a fun, boundary-pushing movie about a group of kids who are left to fend for themselves after their babysitter dies, where Sue Ellen must learn the ways of the sleazy dog-eat-dog adult world in order to provide for the family. It also shows that important decisions can be made by flipping a frozen pizza. Yeah, sorry, I am not getting over that whole pizza toss subplot. It's just so strange and wonderfully random. It's easy to see why Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead has its dedicated fans. It's a funny coming-of-age movie and very much a time capsule of the early 90s. So you will get a good laugh and a trip down memory lane. Anyway, I'm Minty, and seriously, the mum in Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead is terrible! I mean, think about it, she leaves her kids at home to go on a holiday with her boyfriend to Australia, the other side of the world. If my parents had done that to me, I'll be like, hell no, you're not leaving me behind. I want to go to Australia too. Yeah, I know, it's just a movie. So with that, see ya.